This conference will now be recorded.
Fantastic. Welcome to Webinar 1. This is the first of a series of at least 7 webinars, bi-weekly webinars, and we're going to be talking today about the first 10 years. This is 10 years since class 1501. Amongst us, we have several people, and total disclaimer here, there are many others that are so pivotal to what we've become and how we've grown to be the institute that we are. These are just a handful of people. We have Heidi Hammerstein, class 1501, has been instrumental in so many different things, was our first Awesome Possum Award recipient, leads efforts instructing flight test engineering and worked with Possum 13 now with spacesuits. We're going to kick off here with a discussion. I want to share a little bit of my story. Many of you know my story. There's some here as well. I'll go over very quickly, but mostly just want to share the last 10 years, what it was like, what's our origin stories like, how did IIAS help us grow, what did we each contribute to IIAS, what is our hope for the future, what is this institute and what does it mean going forward. This is an incredible time for everyone and the institute as well. Going on from Heidi, I want to introduce Dr. Persad. We couldn't be, again, the institute that we are without his leadership in all things bioastronautics and all of the integration work that he's led and the microgravity research, and his hands are on so many different things. Many of you also know Dr. Shawna Pandya, our aerospace medicine lead, our space medicine lead, and also now director of our flight opportunities program. She's cross-cut through so many things. I think she's taken just about every single class we've had in the Institute. The people that I'm mentioning here, and there's a couple more. Richard Blakeman, also class 1502, wealth of information in all operational science, safety, aviation safety, has been a part of about every campaign we've done as well. And Chris Lundeen, he's our Montgomery Scott. He's got his hands on pretty much everything makes this institute go. Now, this is, again, a subset. These are people that have been around for class 1501 or 1502, been active through the duration. I've got to give some shout outs to Dr. Eric Seedhouse has helped visualize this from the start and has reliably shared his expertise in space life sciences and spaceflight physiology. Ken Trujillo, again, almost there from the start, has taken so much work that we've done together with NASA and has brought in and helped drive our flight test engineering program and so many things in operation, really brought that operation culture to us. Winston Scott, of course, has been an advocate from from the start, has been to so many of our classes, has selflessly contributed to so much of his experience in the astronaut program. Armin Aeronomy and Possum, again, class 15, Armin Kleinbull from 1502 or 1503, I'm sorry. And then later on with, certainly Nora Patton from Ireland, Kelly Girardi, certainly. But the speakers today are those that have come on for the first year and have been active throughout the duration. And yes, there are many more that deserve a shout out. Tom Foltz, our branding, our art, so much of the science communication, been very active in so many of our campaigns as well. So with that disclaimer, let me just share a little bit about. Many of you know my reflection, my story here. Very quickly, this all started as an idea. It started as an extension of a doctoral dissertation. I had a background in flight test and aviation, really was interested in the upper atmosphere. And I'm going to share a couple slides here as we go on. Let me share my screen here. And this was the origin. This was an aircraft, went out and chased some noctilucent clouds. And what's on the lower left there are some satellite images. What's on the lower right are some of the pictures I took from an airplane and looked at coordinating some of the imagery from the airplane and from the satellite. And these are noctilucent clouds learned that very quickly how important they were and how so few people really appreciated them. And from that came an idea that why don't we use vehicles like at that time, this was a vehicle called the X-Core Lynx. It was designed for tourism to send a paying passenger up to 100 kilometers. And we thought, wow, what an incredible opportunity. If you could get to 100 kilometers, you could transition through the mesosphere and you could turn this into a science platform, something that could really tell us about this unknown or little known area of our atmosphere that was so sensitive, this interface between the solar environment and the terrestrial environment. So the idea of using commercial space vehicles for science, integrated science, instead of necessarily tourism was really the origin. This was Project Possum, polar suborbital science in the upper atmosphere. The entire institute really grew from this particular idea of how do you train somebody to be able to be a scientist, astronaut, to be able to do meaningful science in space. We had first program. This is class 1501, and there's a video here of Heidi, the very first time in a spacesuit in a chamber. Well, how did we go? How did we go from a class to look at noctilucent clouds to pressure testing or testing spacesuits in altitude chambers? Well, we needed to design a experiment around an operator in a pressurized or unpressurized IVA spacesuit. So we were designing instruments around the constraints of the spacesuit. Well, soon enough, we were developing the internal expertise to be able to come up with means to test and qualify spacesuits. So this became a storyline of the Institute of learning how to do these things ourselves. When I look now how this Institute has grown, I go into this in a little bit, but we're so much more than this original experiment. We're curriculum developers and research integrators, scientists, educators, operations experts, and pilots, advocates, and yes, activists. Activists. How do we, take this power of space that is historically inspired so many people historically? I look at privilege that I've had in life and growing up in a house full of books with a grandfather with a family that always had time to appreciate that was a great privilege, and felt like everyone should have this opportunity, that the future of space should have means for people to be professionals. And that's where I said it's not something that we want to see commercialization change from the merit that creates the professions that we've historically had in science, the professional astronauts. It shouldn't just be in the future for the rich or influential. There needs to be opportunities for more people to become professionals. So that's the root of what we do and why we do it, is to create space that's broadly inclusive, that emphasizes science, that inspires people into science. And here is that follows class 1502 and 1503, and I put these up here too because you'll see the familiar faces of people that will talk today. There's Shawna and Aaron here as well, and so Heidi in the first picture there, class 1501. So for those that are new, I'm going to just blast through a few highlights of what IIAS is today. So from this initial idea that science can be done on spacecraft, we grew to have an idea that space should be for all, and that there should be opportunities for broadly for people to become professionals. How do we reduce the barriers, create the physical barriers, the economic barriers, increase representation of all people? And since then, we brought people from over 60 different countries here into the program, many of whom have continued into professional certifications in the Institute. We have 9 astronauts, 5 have flown, 4 have selected. Shawna's going to talk more about that. Incredibly proud of that program. And we grow. We're emphasizing so many different fields of science, anything from the microgravity science to bioastronautics, flight test engineering, operational sciences, the list goes on. We have outreach programs that serve underrepresented populations. We're doubling it down on this because the equity and inclusion is fundamental to what we do, and we continue to be a nonprofit. So our core values, again, science, stewardship, inclusion, science from the start. Like, how do we not necessarily use science as a piggyback on science, but how do we fundamentally get people more involved in science, be more science literate, science participatory culture, by harnessing that incredibly inspiring power of spaceflight, that bridge that brings us all together. Stewardship, the roots is Project Possum, understanding global climate, not just understanding how to be a multiplanetary species, how to go out, but how going out helps us understand our planet, helps us live better together, more sustainably, helps us understand the shared environment. And yes, inclusion, absolutely. The bedrock of our programs like Out Astronaut, like Possum 13, like Space for All Nations. We are changing the future of what space can be. And especially in these times, we want to really emphasize that the future, we want to see that future really embrace these values. The research concentrations we have, we talked about some quick pictures of some of our aeronomy work, working in the upper atmosphere, um, studying things like noctilucent clouds and the dynamics of them, modeling them. We have here's Kelly Girardi testing spacesuits in microgravity, bioastronautics, but also so many other bits of research that we have, student research, people coming all over, working with our core partner with the National Research Council of Canada, testing suits in different configurations, contingency configurations, from high altitude drops and looking at suit stability, all sorts of things that can and do happen in space flights, and what does that mean in the landing and post-landing environments. And here looking at a gravity offset lab. These are facilities that our community has the ability to develop internally. Everything from the research facilities here to the boilerplate designs, to the suits and high fidelity simulation. This is very much a member-driven organization. The picture at top is not a staged photo. It shows the intrinsic diversity of our community and what the future of space needs to look like if it's really going to be the future that we aspire and dream to be. And from that here, Out Astronaut, here we're addressing 50% underrepresentation in the LGBTQ community by doing things like putting a pride flag on our moon, at least on our simulated moon when we introduced the gravity offset, and recently organizing this October an LGBTQ microgravity flight focusing on aeromedical issues specific to transgender individuals. Space for All Nations, how do we be good neighbors with each other and help each other up? And with this, we're working with a pilot program in Guatemala, developing a STEM institute, and working throughout the country to really help them get engaged with space and help that impact people broadly. The winning contest from last year is going to come and study and work with universities. She's from a small town in Totonicapan in the southwest of Guatemala. Came up with an incredible model to use sugarcane, indigenous to sugar from the country, and finding that it can be a good binding agent for lunar in situ resource utilization. Possum 13, getting good, emphasizing our positive role models. We have a project coming up dealing with flight test engineering, trying to get more women involved, girls represented in a profession that has about 3% female representation. So these are things we're doubling down with and going forward boldly with. Those are some of the images from our Out Astronaut project, our Space for All Nations project, and yes, astronauts, creating professionals, but then showing people do this in space, from Denise Burnhammer from class 1501, now as a NASA astronaut, our own research institution, research space flights, Kelly Girardi has pioneered with IIAS 01. It's the first institutional research dedicated space flight here, and this is following up under Shawna Pandya's lead, IIAS 02, and the flight opportunities, and then a number of people that have gone to space in other avenues as well. So I want to hand this over to Heidi, but I also want to give a shout out to the webinars here that are going to follow. To every 2 weeks, we're going to talk about topics that are especially germane now, and what we are doing as an institute to really double down on what we do, and I want to see that kind of, that future that we all aspire to be a part of. Next 2 weeks from now, we'll talk about building bridges and not walls. How do we help build bridges for people? How do we remove barriers, the physical, the economic barriers of representation? Webinar 3. 2 weeks from then, we're going to talk a lot about what we're doing with Space for All Nations and what our work is in Guatemala, but also how do we see that as a pilot project that we can expand broadly and help build international networks that help uplift each other, working together on global topics. Climate mandates, global climate change is critical. Most of our information comes from the aerospace community. Our Project Possum is a great example of research in upper atmosphere, most sensitive part of our climate, and a climate that represents the atmosphere as a whole. So understand that is to understand our changes well in our entire ecosystem. So we'll talk about other aspects of how we get information of our own planet from aerospace. We'll follow up with women's equity, what we're doing about that, stories from people that have been active, been exemplary role models, some right here like Heidi and Shawna. Then webinar 6, LGBTQ equity in aerospace, some very enduring barriers that we are actively trying to dismantle, highlight some of our exceptional members from that community. And then finally, looking at, space and STEM in itself, and how do we, how are we going, how are we removing these barriers ultimately to create avenues for more people to be involved in STEM? So yes, I will stop with these, and I want to hand this over to Heidi Hammerstein. I can't say enough about Heidi. She's been such a a, a humble but incredibly capable, infinitely talented lady who's been a part of this program from day one. So, Heidi.
Hello, Jason. Thank you so much for the intro. I have to say from the get-go that I am so humbled and honored to be a part of this story of IIAS and the road that we've taken over the last 10 years. I was thrilled to become a candidate in February of 2015 for class 1501, and it's been an amazing road ever since. And just every year we have a new opportunity for a different experience in operations, our team operations in space, or space training, or the possibilities are truly endless, and we all work together to help progress that and create further opportunities, which is one of the things I truly love about this group, being in an international team with so many very talented people. The combinations that we come up with are truly inspiring, and I value that greatly. I just wanted to tell you guys a little bit about how I came to IIAS and Project Possum. I had been in aerospace engineering. I'm an engineer in aerospace engineering, and I had about I guess 15 years of experience behind me, and I decided to stop work and go to school, back to school for higher degrees in science, so that I could become more diversified and talented for NASA astronaut candidate. And so I worked in initially molecular biology and completed a master's degree there. And then after that, I went on to complete a master's degree in environmental engineering. And at that time, I was doing some extracurricular research in space science with a group called Astronauts for Hire. And that is where I met Jason and so many others in this, Aaron and Eric Seedhouse. I met all of you there. And then Jason announced that he had an opportunity with NASA for developing Project Possum, and I was just so thrilled to be in the right place at the right time with the right experience, and applied, and it's been a fantastic road since. I mean, where else do you have the chance to test spacesuits in microgravity, in water, in active operations, in experimental aircraft, spacecraft, with a team of colleagues that you're working with. So it's been just a dream come true for me, and I'm just so honored to be a part of the group. So one of the things I wanted to point out in aerospace engineering, when I graduated in 1991 from Cal Poly, and my class was about ratio of women to men was about 1 to 30. So I was usually the sole woman in my class in engineering, in aerospace engineering, and sometimes there were two of us. And then I went on to work after college, work in flight test. I worked for 10 years in flight test, first at McDonnell Douglas, and did with commercial aircraft. So initially with the MD-90, aerodynamic performance was my specialty. So I did certification testing on the experimental MD-90. And I, again, the only woman on my team there, or in my aerodynamic performance team, we had another woman, dear friend of mine, in the stability and control team. But that was it. So we just, and it wasn't a hindrance. There were so many who helped us, but it was noticeably a challenge, and you couldn't help but stick out like a sore thumb because you were very different, and so I've been battling that, trying to rise to the occasion to honor the women that I represent, and I think doing that, it's helped me to become a better engineer all around, because I've always just really tried my hardest to represent. And so when starting in Project Possum, I instantly had great admiration for Jason and his drive to bring space to all. And my class, 1501, we had 4 women and 4 men, and it was the first time in my life that I had such an equal footing, women to men, and it was so wonderful. I can't thank Jason enough for doing what he does to be all inclusive across all genders, and I really appreciate that. One of the other things I wanted to point out was this experience with Project Possum and testing spacesuits has been so valuable to me. As an aerospace engineer with now about 25 years experience in aerospace engineering, back when I started Project Possum, it was my first experience with an IVA suit or an EVA suit, and being able to understand the systems, taking the courses and operating in the suits the way we did, gave me the confidence to apply for a position at NASA for spacesuit engineer. I had worked aircraft and spacecraft for many, many years, but I had never worked a spacesuit design program. So with the Possum experience under my belt, about 5 years worth. I applied to the position at NASA, and I got that position, and I worked on the XCMU for 2 years, and I completely credit IIAS and the training that we've done here to that success, because I would not have, minus this experience, I would not have applied for that position, and it's really been a dream position. And when we at NASA, we passed off the XCMU design to industry to build. I moved then on to the human landing system. So I am a NASA Insight engineer on the human landing system for both providers, and it's just a huge honor. I credit my development as a NASA engineer to IIAS and the learning I did here. So Jason, I think that's enough for me.
Jason's muted at the moment, but I think I'm next on the list.
You are.
Go ahead. You're back.
Thank you, Heidi. And I can't say enough about your contributions to the year, and it's an amazing segue to Dr. Aaron Persad.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Aaron Persad. I'll just start off by introducing myself. So I am originally from Trinidad and Tobago. I was born in the Caribbean, and I grew up in Montreal, Canada. So I learned to speak French, like the Quebecois French, before learning proper English. So my sister and my parents would tell me that when I was younger, if I needed to communicate with my parents something complex, I would have to say to my sister in French, and she would translate it to my parents, and vice versa. And then from Montreal, moved to Toronto, where I spent most of my life growing up. And I'm currently based in the US, in Maryland. So I am currently a assistant professor of engineering and aviation sciences at the University of Maryland, Eastern Shore. So not too far from Washington, D.C. If anyone is nearby, just send me a note. I'm more than happy to have you come visit the campus. I joined the Project Possum, or IIAS, back in 2015, class of 1502. And I remember how I got started. Um, Similar to Heidi, I actually had joined Astronauts for Hire before. Um, I got an email from a friend who knows I like to do space stuff, and he told me that there's this group called Astronauts for Hire, A4H, that are looking for flight members. Basically, they were looking for astronaut candidates to represent their program, and these were candidates that would one day have a chance to fly to space on behalf of the organization to do research. And he sent me the application, and I'm like, I've got nothing to lose to apply. So I applied to be a flight member, and I got interviewed. It was very, very rigorous, tons of references and so on. But I got selected as a flight member to represent A4H. And Jason was at A4H at the time, and he spun off Project Possum and sort of did his own thing with that. And I sort of remained with A4H. This was back in 2013. And about a year and a half into it, uh, Jason sort of advertised that he's having his first class in 1501 for Possum, and I was a little hesitant to join the 1501 class because I didn't quite know what it was all about, and it was a lot of money for me at the time. Not to say that it was a lot; it was very accessible, but at the time it was a lot of money. So I figured in my mind, I'm like, I'm not so sure. I'm sitting on the fence. And then one person from 1501, came back and talked about her experience to the Astronauts for Hire team, and she had said that if a program like this existed when she was in school, she would have been over the moon to join it. And I remember hearing her say that, and I'm like, what am I doing waiting on the fence? There's a program that exists that has acrobatic flights, spacesuits. get to learn about a whole new topic, aeronomy, that I knew nothing about. So I signed up for the very next class, and that's how I became involved in 1502. 1502 was amazing. Like the cohort we had, I forgot exactly how many people were there, but a lot of us are still in touch. Richard, Brian Posey, Michael Gallagher, Shawna Pandya, and a few others as well. You know, we're all part of that cohort, and we've been in touch for the past uh, 10 years, working together, innovating together, and so it was absolutely amazing. Um, I learned a lot from the awesome program at the time, that name, uh, about aeronomy. Like I knew nothing about the upper atmosphere research, anything like that. And by the time I went through a program and graduated from that, not only did I feel like I had a good grasp foundation for aeronomy research, but I also had an appreciation for spacesuits research and an appreciation for how aerobatic aircraft can be used to conduct research, like on the human body and human factors related to spaceflight, G forces, and so on. Um, we used G suits at the time. The hyperbaric chamber training, all of that was all new, but it was so immersive that these were real facilities that we were making use of that um, I don't even think some astronauts would have, gotten a hold of until much later in their astronaut program. So the high fidelity of the science, the accessibility in that the cost wasn't prohibitively high. Like I could still afford it. I was a grad student at the time, just graduated with my PhD in 2015. So I could still afford it out of pocket. And it was a life-changing experience, to be honest. And one of the great things about the program, and particularly about Jason, is he welcomes the skills and expertise and ideas of the members. And so I remember we had conversations about we have the spacesuit, and we want to do microgravity testing of the spacesuit, and we just had this open conversation about how to make that happen. And he had his ideas and his pathway. And when I had come into the Boston program, I already had experience managing parabolic flights. So my undergrad at the University of Toronto was in biomedical engineering. And we did some really Frankenstein stuff in in that program. Like we would take stem cells and we actually grew like beating heart tissue out of stem cells. And then the same stem cells we turned into collagen, and then into bone and so on. So it was really wild with that experience. But in my third year, of undergrad, I had 16 months, so 6 months, to do an internship. And so I applied to the Canadian Space Agency, and you had to be bilingual. So half the interview was French, half was in English. And because I had grown up in Montreal, not only did I speak French, but I spoke it with a heavy Quebecois accent. And so I think all of that played a role in me getting the job at the Canadian Space Agency. And fresh out of third year, I show up to CSA, and like that very day they have me, they're like, your position is the parabolic flight campaign coordinator for the Canadian Space Agency. It's like you're in charge of the program. I'm like, wait, what? I'm not the assistant, I'm not helping. No, they're like, you're the person in charge of the program. So for 16 months I ran the parabolic flight program for CSA, and through that, just through the work, I built very strong relationships with NRC Canada. My job required that I work with, the program manager of the the Falcon 20 and the flight program of the Flight Research Lab. That was way back in 2004. So we're talking almost 20 plus years ago. So that relationship and was very helpful. And my role there was doing integration. So Canadian researchers that had to fly into the aircraft, I would integrate their payloads, do the flight certification, work with them, figure out the operations and so on. And sometimes we would have researchers that came from Japan or overseas that would also tag along with the work. So to integrate that. So all that to say, I was able to bring all that experience, and we started the microgravity program here for IIAS. The course started off with spacesuits, and eventually people wanted to bring their own experiments. And so from Bio 103, we branched off to AS2 102. And one of the flight campaigns, I got certified by Ted and Nick to operate the spacesuit and be a certified spacesuit technician. And that eventually led to the work that was done with the EVA spacesuit. And one of the things I like about the program is people come in with their unique research ideas. And for myself, running the microgravity program and even the EVA, teaching some of the EVA courses, I always try to find a yes. Like if a student has an idea for research, I try to work with them to make that a reality. So even if their initial idea may not work in the aircraft or in a spacesuit, we massage it to make it work. And I appreciate having the freedom to do that and to use my discretion on allowing certain experiments to fly on the aircraft. So I only have maybe 30 seconds left. So the final thing that I'll say is the Institute promotes research, promotes accessibility, and promotes high quality of the work that's done. So I'm very happy and excited to be part of this team. All right, thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you for 10 years of your amazing leadership. So, and speaking of amazing leadership, Dr. Shawna Pandya.
Hey, thank you so much. Can I just get a quick thumbs up that you can see and hear me okay? Perfect. Okay, all right. So I know that we're running low on time and we have two phenomenal speakers to come after me, including the incredible Richard Blakeman and Chris Lundeen. So maybe what I'll do is I'll take an opposite track and start with where I am today and then talk about how the foundations laid with my entry into class 1502 made the institution what it is today. So you heard in my introduction that I wear a number of hats at IIAS. So I am currently the executive director of our Flight Opportunities Program. So this is our research spaceflight stream. And we have 7 core values, which I don't think will come as a surprise to anyone who flies under our banner. But basically, to fly as a research astronaut, we request and require that everyone embodies research and science, community, teamwork, excellence, leadership, and experience. And I don't think that's a surprise, even just hearing Heidi and Aaron alone talk about their experiences within IIAS. I also head up our newly renamed Center for Space Medicine, formerly the Space Medicine Group. And through this group, we've done incredible, groundbreaking research that I wouldn't have been able to do anywhere else. We've achieved a number of firsts in human spaceflight through our training evolutions with Kelly and Nora last August at the National Research Council of Canada. We were the first to demonstrate the feasibility of IUD insertion in the microgravity environment, which has implications for long-duration spaceflight. We've also partnered with key partners to do some groundbreaking science in orbital spaceflight. So we had 6 neuroscience payloads in conjunction with Nebula R&D above the Axiom 2 mission with Axiom Space, of course, and then we also put pupillometry on Polaris Dawn mission that came back last September. And so none of this would have been possible both without the experience and expertise as well as the test beds that IIAS gave us. And so it's really fitting that I come after Aaron because he and I went through class 1502 together. If you look back at some of those photos, you will see us looking bright-eyed and baby-faced. And I didn't know then that so many of these folks, like Aaron was saying, would go on to become good friends and extraordinary collaborators. And so everything that I know about payload integration and preparation has come from learning under Aaron as our director of bioastronautics. And I think this is maybe where I can rewind and go back to the year 2015. And I'd like to present a different perspective because you heard about Jason and Aaron and Heidi's entry point into IIAS through A4H. And I ironically joined later as a lead for research, life sciences research, but I came through IIAS first. And so my entry point into IIAS started off with a failure, believe it or not, because once upon a time, so I'm a physician by background, and today I'm an emergency physician, but prior to that, I was training in neurosurgery. And I realized that this wasn't it. This wasn't where I was going to stake my claim on groundbreaking protocols or research. And so I was transitioning out of neurosurgery into my next training program, which would end up being primary care, which led me to emergency medicine. And part of the reason I was transitioning out of neurosurgery is that was all encompassing. So my normal work day when I wasn't on call would be 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. And then if you're on call, you have about 40 hours straight of that. And more than that, it was a program that wasn't interested in anything that was non-neurosurgical. So I was pretty much directly asked to put all of my extracurricular and space medicine interests on hold. And it felt very um, at odds with who I was. And so before long, I realized that I wanted to do something that let me further my passion and expertise in space medicine. And my next training program in primary care let me do that. And at the same time, I made the very conscious decision that space was my first love, and I want to jump back feet first, go all in on space and space medicine. And so the pendulum swung very drastically to the other side, and any conference that came up, I would volunteer for. And at this exact same time, I saw one of my Facebook friends, who was also part of A4H, had posted that he was going to this Project Possum ground school, and I thought, let me at least look at this. Let me click on this. I'm not sure what it is because, at best it could be some sort of way of living out my dreams of going to space camp that I never got to as a kid. But this looks pretty neat. So let me try it out. And that was the beginning of what everything that you see here today. So I chose to sign up for both Class 1502 as well as the Parabolic Flight campaign that Aaron and Jason coordinated with the National Research Council. And it was never about, I think the sense that you'll get from all of the speakers today, all of the students who stay within our community, it's not about glory, it's not about accolades, it's about doing amazing science with good people. And just to underscore that, I flew on that first parabolic flight campaign with a really great team, folks who have since maybe graduated on, but myself and Callum Wallach from New Zealand were testing these IVA spacesuits, and all we were thinking about was making sure we got through every evolution, every tick point on the range of motion and the maneuvers that we wanted to test. And then we got back. We had a very successful flight. Our range of motion testing got a little bit creative. We ended up doing the can-can to test the gross range of motion of the spacesuit in microgravity. And then we got that back down to 1G to terra firma. And I remember Jason turning to me and Callum, and he said, "I think you guys have been the first in the world to ever test a commercial spacesuit in microgravity." And that was just a cherry on top of the cake. We never ever thought about, you know, what is about this as being the first. We thought about doing cool science and doing it together as a very coordinated team. And I'm telling that story because the roots of who IIAS is, the 500 students in the 60 countries plus and growing represented today, have not changed. The caliber and the dedication of the people, whether we're talking about FOP, space medicine, or the ground school, that's what makes IIAS what it is today. So I know I'm probably out of time now. I do want to leave time for questions, so I'm going to pass it off to Richard and then Chris, and then hopefully we'll hear more from you in the question session.
Thank you, Shawna. You are inspiring lives and changing culture with your work. Richard.
See if I can get my camera to work here. It was working fine. Can everybody hear me?
Loud and clear.
Well, I don't know what happened to my camera. Anyway, I'll just adapt, improvise, persevere, and overcome. Well, my name is Richard Blakeman. It's an honor and privilege to be here. Thank you, Shawna, my fellow and Aaron, and all my dear friends, colleagues, classmates, teammates, and barnacles. Long story. But again, my name is Richard Blakeman. It's a privilege to be here. A little of my experience with Project Possum and the International Institute for Astronautical Sciences. Well, my background, I'll kind of go back. My interest in spaceflight goes back to when I first watched astronauts Neil Armstrong and then Edwin Buzz Aldrin walk on the surface of the moon back in 1969. So that really helped inspire me to, you know what, this is something I really wanted to do. So I wanted to pursue it academically. I went through the military. My experience, I flew military government for about 25 years. I also flew airlines for about 25 years as well. And I did apply for NASA. Uh, Obviously, I was not selected. But and then of course Challenger accident. So that really shut the pipeline down. I happened to One day I was in a bookstore and I happened to see this one book, Astronauts for Hire. It was written by our own Dr. Eric Seathouse. So I read that book, and then that enlightened me to guess what? There is more than just one pipeline to perhaps fly to space. Not just the government, NASA, ESA, or what have you, or CSA. There's the commercial applications. So I read it and I was doing some investigation and I said, this is a very good possibility. So from there, I started looking, what could I do to start acquiring training, to get experience? I'd already been flying for many, many, many decades. So I had that. Plus, I got parachute training and etc. when I was in the military. So I happened to see the National Aerospace Training and Research Center, NASTAR Center in Pennsylvania. So they had a suborbital scientist astronaut training program. So I applied for that. I was accepted. I went through that. It was a very, very good training program. And after that, I started looking for other training. And then I happened to find out about Final Frontier Designs. I said, well, they manufacture and they work on spacesuits. So I actually contacted Ted Southern and Nick Moiseev and expressed my interest and said I would be, could I get some orientation or get some training in pressure suits? And they were very accommodating. And so I actually did go through their basic pressure spacesuit program, pressurization program, and also helped test some of their early pressure suits. And that was back in 2013. So I did that in New York, in Brooklyn. And then from there, this was fascinating. So I happened to hear about Project Possum and I investigated and I said, this is something very worthwhile. So I applied, I contacted Jason and I applied and praise, thank you, Jason. I'm eternally grateful and thank God and Jason. And, 10 years later, here I am. So I went through 1502 with my dear colleagues. We were the Awesome 11. And I've just been absolutely dumbfounded with the amount of incredible talent, capability, and the most incredible people I've ever had the opportunity to experience a program with. So one thing I've definitely learned long a time ago is it's not so much the destination, but it's the journey and those who you share that journey with. So I consider myself very blessed with that. So I've participated in just about every type of research, every type of mission program that we've been doing for the last 10 years. And again, here I am, and I hope to continue and contribute in any way, in any capacity for as long as I'm able to.
Thank you, Richard. And that's point that you brought on that's so important is that community, and the diverse community we have. We're pioneering cross-cultural competence and teamwork that's not just applicable in operational environments that we deal with, but it's applicable to all walks of life. So yeah, intention, purpose, community, all these things I hear through your words. So thank you for sharing your expertise. And we couldn't be what we are now without the multi-talented and infinitely personable Chris Lendine.
Hello. This is going to be a tough one coming after all those people, folks. I guess I'm kind of the young one here. I came around in 2016, a year after Heidi and Shawna and Aaron and Richard all came through, and it was just a unique opportunity that just happened to come, and I was lucky enough to see it and take it, and came in to help out, working on spacesuits. And soon really took to it and became a spacesuit tech. And then I am currently kind of the everything behind the scenes guy. If you were a student at IIAS, you've talked to me. You've probably emailed me many times, um, and we have had conversations. I do most of the stuff there. I also work with um, most of the classes. I'm in Arizona in the summer, working with two classes there with Shawna's space medicine class and Jose and Uli's um, class on geology. And then I am in Florida twice a year with AST 101. And also with the microgravity or the gravity offset we have down there in that lab. And then up in Connecticut, we've got a lab set up there, and we do all of our water classes. And I am up there for those as well. And every now and then, Jason and Aaron let me come up to Ottawa and go on the microgravity and hang out with them up there. So I'm excited about it. But this is amazing that this is that 10 years. I keep thinking about this, and even though it's been 9 for me, to make it 10 years and to do it the way that we've done it, which is so unique. We specialize in opportunities. We have kept our prices low. We've kept a incredibly high integrity. We bring in the best and the brightest people to teach our classes, and people get it when they come to our classes. They understand. They feel like it's a family, and I get to see that, and that is just that blows me away every time. Um, but opportunities is what is important, and especially bringing opportunities to this world, bringing opportunities to non-spacefaring nations, bringing opportunities to the LGBTQ community, to women, and getting them into STEM, and so we can make thousands of Heidis, and level the playing fields all over the place, so that we don't look out there and go, wow, that's really cool. I could never do that. I want everybody to think that if they wanted to do that, they can do that. And that is the backbone of what IIS to me has been. And my journey, starting in 2016 with that first class and suiting them and watching it, and how I've watched when we only had that class, watch that progress and change and develop, and get better and better and better. And we bring in more people, and then started sprouting more classes and all these different classes taught by top-notch, amazing people. It blows me away that we can do this. Um, it's been an amazing journey. So I don't want to take up too much time because I don't know. I think Jason was talking about possibly answering some questions. I don't know if that's what we were going to do today, but was that in the plans there, Jay?
Yeah. Is that good, Chris?
Yeah. Unless somebody's got some questions for me, I typically am in the background of things and try not to do too much of the public speaking part. That's on in more in Shauna's world, we'll say.
Chris, thank you. It's been amazing, and we've known each other for 35 years, and it's also been a privilege to grow professionally together in this and learn from you in that way in your pursuits and your growth too. It's been an amazing journey, and that topic of family you brought up routinely. That's just not amongst the people here in this group and IIAS. We, over and over help each other be the best versions of ourselves as possible. And now thinking about idea, we talked about this idea from the start when it was just the possum experiment, the idea that these spacecraft could be used for science. But now there's an idea of what the future of space can and should look like. One of my personal heroes I didn't appreciate when I was young, but I appreciated much later, was Gene Roddenberry of Star Trek. The creator had the audacity to create this vision of a future and challenge so many things of the present and give people hope and a vision and an inspiration. And in some ways, we see ourselves here in this incredible community, this incredible family, and thinking of all of the challenges that are now upon us and the world about us, and how in the future we can see that this may just be a footnote, and that maybe someday in this future that embraces these principles of science and stewardship and inclusion, we'll look back and say, well, this was one of those little beacons, this one of those little sparks of light that grew and helped incubate a future that we all know that we can help be a part of, help be a seed to. So finding a community, a family that we can relate and work together and help elevate each other to be the best we can be, helps us be better advocates, better activists to a world that I think desperately needs the qualities that we found that we all brace together. So, okay. Well, we're right at an hour, but I'd like to leave the channel open a little bit for questions. And I thank everyone who's been on this and has attended, and people here I look that have been a part of this that I certainly deserve. Our runner-up possum from last Awesome Possum, Coy, is here. It's been incredible work, and Dustin's been here for a long time as well. I see a number here, as well as another one of originals, Michael Parkhill, and I talked about Tom as well, Armin, of course. Victory, they're new into the program, but it's been wonderful. And Achintia now getting with spacesuits, and so and Sammy, and I bring up some of these topics because the uniqueness of skills and how we survive and grow isn't that we go out and look for big investors to help us buy infrastructure and this and that. We succeed because we assimilate expertise, and that we share the sense of mission and family and this expertise. Sammy's a great example. Space robotics, not just a course, but it's a fundamental ability. And Aaron with integration. All of this comes together to allow us to have the kind of shared expertise that allow us to adapt to the changes in industry, allow us to grow. And go through tumultuous times like we had with the pandemic. We changed and we grew from it, and so this all comes back. I'm going to share one little story here because it's kind of amusing, and I think I've shared it once a long time ago, but just because Chris and I were talking, we had a campaign up at NRC Canada, and so much of our preparation, we pride ourselves on being redundant and planning and executing and bringing that science, engineering, and operations together so everything is flawless. And we found ourselves right before a major campaign where the one thing we didn't have redundant, the principal pump to pressurize the spacesuit wasn't there. They had a problem and we couldn't fix it. So this happened just the night before we were to start our campaign, that everyone was there from all parts of the world and prepared. What were we going to do? And within an hour, our team came together and everyone was bouncing ideas. People were on the phone. Hey, can we drive to Toronto? Can we pick up one? Is there a place? Can we ship something overnight? So then it became to, can we have someone fly it up from New York? What can we do? Then it came to, well, they have an extra in there. Maybe I could fly it down and pick it up in the morning. All these off the wall ideas. And then I think it was Gavin who was like, well, what about Uber? It's like, well, what about it? And it's like, well, maybe we could get an Uber driver to pick it up in a shop in New York and we could drive down, meet halfway, and pick it up, and we'll get it back in time. And the only one we knew there was Nikolai Muziev, who has very strong accented Russian accent. And so we're like, well, why don't we just give it a try? And so we got hold of Nick, and Nick got hold of a Uber driver. Within 2 minutes, the Uber driver agreed to drive 5 miles to a parking lot at 2 in the morning and meet two people in the parking lot. And so Chris and I drove down over the border of Canada, met this guy at 2 in the morning, picked up, got it back just in time, integrated it. We flew without a hiccup. Most people didn't even know what happened. And we asked Nikolai, it was like, how did you convince this guy to take this box to two guys in the middle of a parking lot 5 hours away? And Nikolai was like, it was no problem. He spoke Russian. He was Russian. I could speak Russian. I could tell him the problem. So, it's just, something, it was success from a failure, but it gives, a show of just how much this creative community can think outside of the box, and how, so many ideas, and all of a sudden one came to the top. And, hopefully we don't ever have to dig into that, because we are so trained and practiced that when we come to something, there's not a problem. But when it does, it's amazing to really know that you have the team around that will find some creative solution out of problems. So anyway, I thought I'd share that with everyone. I'd like to take some questions. If you want, just go ahead. We just have a smaller group here, so if you'd just like to just speak up, and please do.
Hey, Jason,
Hey,
and for everybody, sorry for connectivity. I'm in the middle of, let's just say, Southeast Asia on a ship, hence it's vibrating a little bit. The question I had is, so we've had 10 wonderful years as it stands. It's grown immensely. What is your vision, Jason, for the next 10 years? Over.
10 years, the honest answer, on one hand, it's personally, it's hard to say, because the community changes, the industry changes, and I think that's a strength, that we grow and adapt. So it's hard for me necessarily to put something out now. Now, being the kind of institute that is that grows and focuses on what we do, that expands, that, seeing space for all nations, touch more countries, incubate projects and institutes there, seeing the Flight Opportunities Program create more opportunities in different platforms of orbital access to space. See the projects that we already do with our program services, Possum 13 and Astronaut Space for All Nations, really impact people more exponentially, but also ways that we can always keep things accessible and broadly. 10 years from now, it's hard to project, honestly, where things would be, but I'd like 10 years from I'd like 10 years from now to see a world that more embraces our values, and know that our community has been instrumental to that. And I think that question also maybe deserves a response from several of the other panelists.
I can say really quickly. I think what I know is that there are brilliant people that are members of IIAS. And so what I would like to see in the next 10 years is that they come forward with their research passions, with their skills, and grow the program in a way that doesn't currently exist. When we got started, we sort of had a blank canvas, and there's a need for microgravity. I have an expertise in microgravity. Let's make a microgravity program. And Shawna came in with the space medicine, and Sammy's doing robotics, and Armin has done the atmospheric sciences and so on. So we come in and we bring that passion, and we build the program out that way. So I'm hoping that we will see more of that growth and that diversity of research topics pop up in the next 10 years. and more flyers to space. Right now we're looking at suborbital space, and I'm hoping that within 10 years we would have our orbital, we'll see our members go into orbit.
Thanks.
Maybe I can add to that. I think the best answer to that is create the future that you want to see for yourself in space, and we've done that by virtue of empowering our members. And so I don't think there's any other institution at which I would have gotten to do the space medical science that I've done. And it started with both learning the principles of microgravity science from Aaron, having access to our test beds in microgravity, gravity offset, and beyond, and then just being imaginative and saying, what would this look like in space? And that's pretty much how all of my scientific queries have gotten started. And so I'm just going to tell this quick little story because I think it kind of pairs both the passion of knowledge and looking at trends as well as the power of imagination. So I teach a class at my university called Technology in the Future of Medicine, and I've been teaching it for 14 years now. And because it requires me to look at and predict the future of medicine and technology and trends, there is some prediction and imagination that's involved. And so when I was first creating this slide deck and these seminars over a decade ago, I started doing this exercise that also involved naming careers that didn't exist 10 years ago, careers that won't exist in 10 years, and careers that exist today that did not previously exist. And so one of those slides, I listed commercial astronaut, second generation astronaut. This was in 2011 when we didn't even have, any of this on the horizon, just that we knew that companies like Virgin were doing tests in the desert. And when I was showing the students this slide this past semester, I realized that these slides are now out of date because the future is here. And so just to turn this question back towards the IIAS membership, there is so much potential for what we want the future to be, whether we want to have a campus in low Earth orbit, as Aaron was alluding to, whether we want to be part of the next groundbreaking science that happens in physical sciences, fluid sciences, space medicine. I think all of that's possible, and it's because we have this self-selected, high-caliber group of driven, team-oriented, passionate individuals. So let this be our call to action to have everyone on this webinar here today who's interested in seeing what the next 10 years looks like, have your voice in saying what the next 10 years at IIAS should be.
Yeah. Thanks, Shawna. Any other questions? We got be time for one more. If not, we hope you will join us 2 weeks from now, the 10th of March. We're going to talk about building bridges and not walls. So specifically, what kind of barriers exist and how can we all together, not just IIAS, but how can we all help eliminate and reduce some of those barriers of access. Thank you all for being a part of this evening, and for many of you, thank you for being a longstanding member of this institution.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, guys. Great presentation.
Thanks, Jason. Much appreciated. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for all your vision.